couple gave me a computer and $1,000 in 1979, and that's how we started the Learning Company. And the best work, I feel, was done early when we had 3 or 4 people.
Talk about like some of the products that need to be made. And we're assuming we're going to play this at Duster Magic, so a lot of small developers, a lot of smart developers need some direction. And so what's your message?
Well, mine is to think about the real needs of children. I think as soon as the Learning Company got away, it just thought of the market, like what parents think they want. I'm going to be really, I'm glad I don't have investors right now. Not like this. I was accused once by one of my board members, who was very smart, that I give children what they should want instead of what they do want, or that parents want. We have to conceive of something nobody's thought of, and that takes some research and some time to think. So I think that there has to be a way that play finally meets learning in a more powerful way, and that the structure of and sequence of learning is respected in that we don't throw things like, in a game you might get alligator and cat to spell in the same game. It's like they aren't on those 2 levels. They're really just figuring out 3-letter words, or they're doing multiple syllable words. It's just, you can learn a lot by exploring, but that structure and sequence has to be underneath it without getting tedious and boring, which is what happens when you rely on the educators like me.
Is there one title in particular that you'd like to see on an iPad?
Oh, Rocky's Boots.
Really?
In a heartbeat, yeah.
And Aleen Stein, and I was a publisher of new media when they didn't exist at the very beginning, and we just started doing that. We didn't do the tried and true. Everybody told us...
This was at Voyager.
This was at Voyager, yes.
And where was...
It was a number of companies it was a succession of companies, but Voyager was one of it. And then Organa after that, you know, my personal voyage anyway. And my partner, Julia Jones, who worked in both companies, is here today as well. Wave, Julia. Yeah. It wasn't... They all worked on projects that they were passionate about. They all picked projects that they were passionate about. And we put different talents together and allowed them the freedom to really explore that to get there.
What would you like to see on an iPad?
I would love to see pause on an iPad, but it'll never happen because of the rights. This whole new media thing or multimedia thing or whatever we want to call it, is kind of like a moving staircase or a moving sidewalk, and if you step off for a little while, you are shocked at how far it's gone from when you started. And the people who are on it and like almost at the forefront don't even know you anymore, because you're only, you know, you were 20 years ago, and everything that you did, which they're building on, they've never even heard of. They haven't heard of the companies, they haven't heard of the products, they have no idea. And I was thinking of Silly Noisy House when I was looking at the Itsy Bitsy Spider and all of those, because when Peggy Weil made that, you know, really groundbreaking thing, which you clicked on something and all kinds of things happened, it was really, really new, and it was really, really hard to do, and it took a long time to do, and nobody has ever done it before. And now nobody's even heard of it, but they're doing it, you know, on new platforms. My own role in all that was, you know, not to create this stuff, but to appreciate it. So I would meet a Darren, or, you know, the guy who invented the Book of Lulu, and I would see this thing that really needed nurturing and helping along, and maybe some ideas here and there to get it published, and then I would publish it. We did do some really pioneering things that everybody else could build on, and it was, you know, things that a Scholastic or a Fisher-Price would look at and they'd say, oh, that's really cool. Let's do this subset of that, and let's make a lot of money. And it was great, but I actually don't regret not being Fisher-Price or Scholastic, although I did work for Scholastic for a while, and I was really struck at how the process is really, really different there. You know, they're so constrained by what's going to make a profit, what the license can do. Margo Nanny was one of our authors. You don't make those kind of things by saying, okay, well, we're going to assemble a group of developers and we're going to put them all to work and we're going to make fabulous programs. It just doesn't happen that way. Not without the spark of, I mean, it's like the spark, the person who originally has that kind of passion and brings it to it. Then you can assemble a group and you can put together all the pieces.
Hi. So I was a teacher, a math teacher, and I ended up getting into technology and learning. And I ended up getting a master's at Mills, where I ended up with an internship at Apple Computer, which led to the Apple Multimedia Lab. And my master's thesis was to turn the movie Donald in Magic Land into the first interactive video disc Mac SE interface, where you could you control the movie. We made a little map of the movie on the Macintosh, and that would control the movie. So you could jump to the exact place where Donald in Magic Land was playing pool, and then on the Macintosh you could do a little pool app to understand vectors in mathematics. So at the lab we were looking for things that were like that, and we ended up doing the Visual Almanac, which had a lot of very unique ideas. And as an educator, my part in the lab was to think about what could this media do, and the media at that time was video disc and Macintosh. What could the media do that you couldn't do in other ways? And so my big thing was I worked with Bob Mole, who had done a lot of very interesting projects with time and space. And so we thought that if you could do things, if you could make concepts that are really hard to learn, make them very accessible to young children with this media, that would be pretty interesting. And so we did things like, if you think about you're on a merry-go-round spinning, and you roll a ball across the merry-go-round, for you, it goes right across to the person across from you. But if you put a camera up here and shoot it, that ball goes at a 90-degree angle. And that's a way to kind of begin to think about relativity. And any kid who sees that piece of footage starts saying, wait a minute, what happened? And so what we did on the Macintosh is we digitized the screens, and you could actually trace the path of the ball and see that it actually went in a straight line. But this person over here was straight across by the time the ball got there. So using this media, we made those kinds of examples, and we made lots of these examples. And then Bob Mole and I, when at the end of sort of multimedia lab phase, Voyager had us do some spin-offs, and we made 2 products, Planetary Taxi and Countdown, which helped kids see different concepts. One was estimation, and one was trying to see the scale of the solar system by going down a road and just you pass the first planets really fast, and then you just go on forever. It's kind of seeing the relative scale of the solar system.
So Donna Stanger at Mark once said, she talked a lot about the concept of virtual manipulatives.
Yeah.
And the idea of hardwiring a child's finger to the concept, so that you could actually squeeze and pull in and zoom in and take something that's very abstract, like the rotation of a planet, and link their finger to it so they can control it. And you guys were really, I would say, a pioneer in that space.
And I guess my message to people now is the kinds of ideas that we had then still really haven't been realized. We got out of the industry because the industry went for drill and practice, which is a great disappointment to us. And for myself, I left the industry and went back to helping teachers learn how to use technology, because the technology wasn't getting to the kids. There were great ideas. You know, the people who did the demo earlier, you know, they wanted math thing. Well, you know, we did so many, there were so many really beautiful, simple math things that you should look into the old ideas. And you should, if you can find an old machine, you know, call me up. I've got a whole library, or call Aleen. I mean, Voyager, they were just pioneers and stuff. But anyway.
I want to say, I donated my entire library, like about 5,000 of your all CDs, to the Strong Museum of Play. And I don't know how the heck you're ever going to get them to run, but the idea, and I've always
just
had...
use an old computer.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you come on. But I was just thinking, you know, it would be so wonderful to take this group, go there, and just play. And I think that should be a part of every graduate program, to go start up Planetary Taxi and say, okay, and this, you know, like what Darren did with the stamp, it's a mental exercise. How can we take it and bring that idea into this device now? So there's all these ideas. I mean, think of the human capital, millions and millions of hours of human capital, and the brightest minds over the last 20 years working in this space that all just stopped. It died because of the hardware. So, yeah?
I do have one brief thing. A friend of mine, I'm sorry. A friend of mine, when I was in England recently, showed me one of his CD-ROMs that he had done for a CD-ROM, the table of elements, and I was really delighted to see that that is one of the leading things in the ad for the iPad. And it was a CD-ROM, and they added a little bit of stuff to it, but it was essentially the same thing.
Hey, I'm Susan Schilling. Where were the Minnesotans again? All right. I just wanted to let you know, okay, I started out in Minnesota at Control Data Corporation. And this is back when they used to talk about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Snow White was IBM. It was the mainframe computer environment, and the Seven Dwarfs were all pretty much in Minneapolis. You had Sperry, Univac, Honeywell, Cray Computer, Control Data Corporation. They were all mainframe companies. The computer industry started in Minnesota. And I'm holding true to that, and you guys help me with that. That's right. So I started out working at Control Data Corporation with the Plato system, and then moved from there to MECC, which was one of the first companies to put nationwide K-12 programs together for educational software. And I think probably the product that MECC was best known for was Oregon Trail. It started out, on the mainframe, where you had to type in quickly BANG every time you wanted to shoot one of the deer. And we had to take that product every year and change it to a different platform. So we took it from mainframe to the Apple II, Apple IIe. We actually went from green screen to 4-color ProDOS. Remember that? And then we went to the GS, and then we went to the Macintosh, and then finally IBM got enough market share that we did a DOS version. We did a network version and started to make that product collaborative with the Wagon Train, which was basically Oregon Trail, that you could take it in that direction. And then the consumer market came alive, so we tried to take it into the consumer market. And then that's when MECC ran into the rest of the industry in the consolidation phase, where everything came down to basically being, all of the creative small companies were being bought out as the market was consolidated.
More driven out of business.
Yeah. So then I came to California and did a startup for George Lucas, doing work with the Star Wars property in the consumer market with educational product. And then when the whole industry collapsed after retail, we lost distribution. Then I moved over to the nonprofit field, and for the past 10 years I've been doing school development with a model that's one-to-one computers in a project-based learning integrated subject environment. So that was collaborative tools as opposed to the software.
So we've come a long way since you typed B-A-N-G.
Yeah.
Now I can light a fire with my so what app or what software product from MECC Would you like to see?
Well, I think it's already there. I haven't seen it. But
There is an Oregon Trail, and ironically programmed in France. For the, yeah.
I'm sure they got the license.
I can see, oh, we shoot what they dare. I don't know what those Americans.
I think probably from the Lucas days, Pit Droids was probably my favorite.
Yes, Pit Droids. So that's one. Smart graduate students, go find Pit Droids, because what that did with programming and getting kids and explain how what Pit Droids was.
Well, it was all higher order math concepts that were basically done with the Pit Droids going in different patterns, and you had to intersect with them and move them in different directions in order to get the outcome that was desired. I was never very good at it, but I loved it.
That would really be a good one.
That'd be a good
The interesting
ad.
thing about Pit Droids was that it was based on Gardner's multiple intelligences. So every piece of the game
You bought the box. And you spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to talk about your product and how to design your box so that it would get consumer attention. So I think the thing that I'm so impressed with the iPad right now is that you don't have to do this anymore. You don't have to spend your money trying to figure out how to put the right words on the box to get the consumer's attention. You can spend more of your time actually focused on what is your pedagogy, what construct are you trying to get across, how are you going to make it entertaining, how are you going to use music and art and everything else to enhance the experience for the child.
I have this box. I do. I didn't throw this one out.
Actually, I'll talk about that tomorrow because I think you get one screen and 50 words to win them over, and that's a different challenge.
Yeah.
That's good.
Seriously,
But the Oregon Trail
That's good.
I'm David Kleeman, president of the American Center for Children and Media, and I feel morally obligated, actually, after hearing the first three people talk about what they've done in this industry and knowing the next three to come, to squander a little of my time to tell a joke that I think is instructive of what I'm doing here. There's a man driving through the countryside one day and finds himself suddenly surrounded by sheep. And he gets out of his car and walks over to the farmer and says, I can tell you how many sheep you've got. Can I have one of them? The farmer says, okay, it's a deal. So the guy goes back to his car, he gets out his iPad, amazingly enough finds a 3G signal from AT&T. How he does it out in the countryside, who knows? But starts playing around on it, and a few minutes later says, you have 247 sheep. Okay, go ahead. The guy takes it down, puts it in the back of his car, and the farmer says, well, wait a minute. If I can tell you what your profession is, can I have my animal back? The guy says, fair enough. He says, you're a consultant. The guy says, how did you know that? He says, well, three things. One, no one asked you to come here. Two, you told me something I already know. And three, you know nothing about my business. Now give me back my dog. Having heard these three and knowing these three, I am so much here to take your dog. My history in this is I went off to college many, many years ago wanting to be a preschool teacher. And at the time, it was unusual not only for a man to want to be a preschool teacher, but also I went to Harvard. They don't really have a whole lot of use for preschool teachers. So while my college roommates were all studying their organic chemistry and their mill and lock and all these things, I was watching Sesame Street. And realized very quickly on that I could teach a lot more effectively through media than I could in a classroom. And there are a lot of really lucky kids now that I never did become a classroom teacher. But I was able to forge a career where I never had the program I needed to produce, or the content I needed to produce. But instead, what I love to do is help people who do have that passion, who've got something they just have to make, do their best work. And that's what the center is devoted to, is that kind of building. I spent 5.5 years at PBS, and I think that what to me is so impressive about today is that when I was at PBS, I had program managers from the local stations come up to me and say, we have Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers. We don't need any more children's programming. What we've learned about children, about their diverse interests, their needs, their abilities, and how we've responded to it with so many people out there with that passion to create something and with a brilliant idea, I think has been just revolutionary. What we've learned about children's minds has really informed that. I'm recommending to everyone this book that has just come out, Mind in the Making by Alan Galinsky. And there's, if you are looking for inspiration for creating apps, it's all right in here. It will take you right to the center of the mind of the child. And what I'm hopeful about, I've watched the children's television industry in particular go from a fairly robust creative industry to one where unless you really are tied in, it's very hard to get something made. It's very hard for someone to walk in off the street with a great idea and get something done because there are so many gatekeepers and so few gates. And I'm so hopeful that this provides, these new devices.
So many of the things that I'm more interested in some of the conversations we just had, because playground physics is so far out, which is one of the ones that Margo was talking about, where you're sitting on the playground wheelie thing with your friends, and you got to go in as fast as you can. You're hanging on the outside, centrifugal force. And then they had all the kids leaning, and the speed changes, and they lean up, and the speed changes. And I remember watching that with my kids. And then we went down to the playground and did it. And it was like, ooh, this is cool. This is cool. Because it was so, and as we were saying, nobody's done that before. Voyager did the first books on floppy disk. They did Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, I think was one of them. I can't remember.
60 different ones.
That's right.
Yeah.
And no one
Mostly
knows about
Random
them.
House, yeah.
And yet, when I look at the iPad, I am seduced by the turn to page turn, which is so sexy because it shows you the last page and the next page. We were always trying to figure that out with living books, how to get that sexy page turn. But I do like how that feels. But I look at it and I go, I stack it up against the stuff from Voyager, and I say, well, can I bookmark it? Can I copy a section and pull it out later, put it in my other report? And that's a good quote. I should be able to just pull it out and save it. I ought to be able to change it to more than one size of font, So there was a bunch of things that they did that was like, still, we're just now, all these years later, coming back around to it, which I think is pretty amazing. And I think that's the way it is with a lot of the products that we've seen. Rocky's Boots was amazing. And yet, even I never saw it, except somebody dragging me over and showing me on some really ancient machine.
In Book of Lulu, where Lulu unzips the picture, goes inside and comes out on another page.
Yes. Yeah.
Brilliant idea. Brilliant idea.
If I could have done two, I would have done the Book of Lulu too.
Yeah.
So I think there was a lot of amazing stuff, and it's sad for us to see that a lot of it hasn't come back around.
Tell them what you do now.
Oh,
Right.
So,
What is that?
okay. So I started a company. Actually, let's see. I'm a child advocate, I guess, at this point, and child play advocate. And I was inspired by my own children, who you just watch them play. I remember watching one of my sons rented a Nintendo game, and he and 3 buddies on a machine that could only play one person at a time, without a manual, got to the 52nd level of the game in 3 hours, with one boy playing. And I remember thinking, well, there's a lot of critical thinking going on here. And look at the draw. I mean, it's like a heliotrope, how thin a flower follows the sun. Kids are like technotropes. They're right on it, it's like. And I thought, I tried to get these same boys to do 10 minutes of homework together. And here they just did 3 hours. And I thought, okay, well, there's something got to happen here. And I got myself hired at Brøderbund by being annoying, I went in and I had this portfolio from having been an art director and working special effects in the movies, and I did a bunch of kid drawings, and I had this great portfolio, and I went in and I looked at it and went, no thank you, because it was too general, I wasn't a specialist. And then I saw the ad up 3 weeks later, and I called back and said, hey, I'd like to get your ad up. And I'm going, no, that's taken. I'm sorry, we don't need you. And this is just a story about being persistent, you know. And then I was about to call them up again because I saw they were still advertising. The art director called a Sweet 3D, which is a computer school in the city, where I had gotten onto a high-end system just so I could play on it. And they said, well, if you have to teach one night's class about it since you got to play on it. And I made friends with the receptionist and everybody in the company, which is, I think, a big part of how we used to do it, where you connected was you didn't have the structure of a company. I came out of a commune, going into this 10 years in a commune, and I learned a lot about politics, and when I got into the corporate world, it was child's play, because there was so much more corporate, there's so much politics in the commune, that it was really quite easy in the company. And the art director called there looking for a Mac artist, and the receptionist said, I got that guy for you. And she finally gave in, and they gave me a job, you know, doing Carmen San Diego illustrations. But what really shifted for me was, and this would be the app that I actually have done some work on rebuilding, is HyperCard. Only I don't want HyperCard per se. But I saw Bill Atkinson's demo HyperCard at Macworld. And he's the guy who created MacPaint and a bunch of the other early applications. And you know, there's a story behind it that a lot of people don't know, is that he built this authoring environment so that anybody could create something, teachers, everybody. And the Mac and the Apple marketing department said, this is great, but they were going to sell it for $200. And he said, no, you're not. He said, you're going to put it out for free, or I'm going to put it on every bulletin board, and everybody's just going to have it. And he held the marketing department ransom, and I thought, whoa, that was revolutionary. Because that's what it was. It was an authoring tool for everybody. It was out of the hands of the programmers. And that day, and it's an interesting story because it relates to exactly where we are today. When I came into working on computers, I was interested. I thought I was so late. I had friends who'd already made programs for like 5 years or 3 or 4 years. It was 1986. You know, and I thought, oh man, I'm so late. I'm so late into this. But I'll give it a try, you know. And everything changes. We have these loops that keep coming and going. So we started talking about the progressions of all these old software that we can't hardly look unless we have an old machine. And then the market saturates, and the marketing people kill it, as they did, you know, everybody went from market share, and Disney, you know, we had 1 year where everybody came out in 1996, where everybody came out with 25 titles at Christmas, and the whole market completely collapsed. And CD-ROMs were gone, and then we kind of slid into the internet, and then, you know, but everybody who was doing internet thought everybody who was doing CD-ROMs was dinosaurs. You know, we were already the old guys then, you know, and we were doing CD-ROMs, we thought we were pretty odd because the floppy disk guys were And so here we are out in a whole new world, and every time we have this new world, we have the opportunity for GarageBand to happen again. And, you know, back to Amanda.
You want to hold it and feel it.
That's right.
Get the feel of it again.
Bill Atkinson showed a storybook by Amanda Goodenough called Kyoko's Dream, where she had just sat down and done the drawings and done the little loops and put the pieces together, and here was the product. You know, she just made it and sold, you know, 500 copies at $60 a piece. Bang. Or more. I mean, she ended up selling a couple thousand of them. This was something that, and I looked at it and I said, I can do better than that. And I ended up creating a company inside Brøderbund called Living Books, which were interactive animated children's books in multiple languages. And that whole story, the politics of doing that is a whole other interesting story, how an unknown designer talks a company into spending millions of dollars on a market that's non-existent and get to do what you want. That's kind of an interesting piece, but the real thing was following out what is it that really speaks to kids? What is it that all the pieces, and so much of it's already been talked about here today, you know, what makes it sticky? Well, it's age appropriate, and it's it's immediate and gives them control. And you know, it was so fun to watch Carolyn's demo, because I wasn't watching as much as I was listening to you. And while we were doing the wheels go around, there'd be these laughs over in the corner here at certain points. And I could tell which gags really worked and which gags didn't work. And actually the wheels go around got a much higher audience response than the spider for surprise. What do you call it? You don't call it surprise, you call it spontaneous mistakes, or what was a good word?
Accidental success.
Accidental successes. And so it was fun to watch what tickled that. So I was copying Kyoko's Dream, and Carolyn's copying some of the things I did, and we all kind of borrow and work from each other. So it's all been quite a fun process to do this. And for a lot of us, we all knew each other, you know, after a while, because it was a pretty small circle. And one time I was speaking at Cal with Claire Curtin, who was at Maxis then doing SimCity stuff, but she had been the Queen of Carmen for the first 6 years and built the whole lineup, the producer. And one of the students said, well, shoot it. Sounds like you guys all know each other. And without a beat, Claire says, oh yeah, if it'd been the 60s, we would have all slept together. But we were friends, and we were jamming, and we were having fun. And
the one thing that you rubbed against probably is you rubbed against magic. I mean, those books had a rocket ride for a while. What was that like?
I was fortunate to be at the beginning of the new medium, as we're talking about, at the right place and the right time. And there is a thing about adding magic to the product. We were talking about it earlier, that it was interesting. We had a friend of ours at Brøderbund knew John Lasseter, and he just won his Academy Award for Little Luxo. And he agreed to come and talk to my animators. So that was great. So he came and he brought his Oscar in a cardboard box, like a grocery box, and he passed it around and we all got to hold it. What's happening? And he said, the last 10% where you massage it is where it comes to life. And that's what we found with living books, is that you massage it until it tickles you. And if it doesn't tickle you, then you haven't got it. And I just watched, that's what I was watching today, was what tickled people. And it isn't being more sophisticated. There's just it's a simple, straightforward surprise thing that gets you control. It's a combination of those pieces that.
Do you have a favorite gag in one of the living books that you remember?
I don't. It's been so interesting watching it all, because different gags spoke to different people.
There was a cop in a park that I always liked in one of them, and Ruff's Bone. I just really loved Ruff's Bone. I don't know. Was there one title that you liked more than others? They're all your children.
They're all my children.
All your children.
The one that a lot of people didn't see that was really fun was we did one with Jack Waletsky. It was all poetry.
That's right.
They were all poems, and we got Jack to come and sing them all. And he was such a hoot. In fact, I was told not to do it, not to do a prototype. This is the politics of the company. I was told, by the CEO, don't do this. And I went ahead and did it anyway, because I knew I could do it in a couple of days. And I used a recording of Jack from a piece of thing. And the head of the company, I was bringing his mother on a tour of the company. And he wanted to know what was new. So I showed his mother the animated poem of When Tilly Ate a Chili, which is totally hilarious. And she just raved about it and turned to him and said, Doug, this is just terrific. And it was Doug who said, don't you dare do this. He warned me on threat of death. So then I had a working prototype, and I had to go up and show it to Jack, and I flew up to see Jack and with a computer, and I set it all up, and I played it for him, and he sat there very quietly. I'm sitting in his living room, and he turned to me and he said, will you marry me?
There was another person that was quite infatuated with you, Geisel, where the Dr.
Mrs.
thing.
Seuss.
Yeah. Remember that there was a meeting, right? And a lot of people wanted the rights to that.
Well, actually, we were telling the story before about what happens when your boss tries to steal your thunder. Where you've got something going, and then your boss wants to take all of the shots for it. Somebody else was telling me that story earlier today about in their company. And Random House had lost the rights to Seuss for the interactive media, and they were all going to make a big presentation tour, Microsoft and all these different companies, and my boss said, I'm going to go do it. He's going to go demo my product. And she fell asleep in the middle of the demo. literally went to sleep, and Random House lost the rights, and it was going to go to Paramount. And he was so upset he wanted to do it again, so they had me come back and do a demo, and for her, and it was all the New York lawyers from Random House, and
we got Goldfish. Was that the one with the Dr. Seuss plates and the Goldfish?
That's right. Yeah,
Ted Krekel was the PR guy.
Yeah, that's right. And all the LA guys were all in polo shirts and gray polo shirts, and the guys from New York all walk in black suits, and the guys from LA go, "What, a funeral? Did you all just come from a funeral?" And it's like they're ragging on each other, but it's all lawyers. This whole table full of lawyers and Mrs. Seuss and me. And I got about 3/4 of the way through my demo, and she stepped up out of her chair, and she's about this tall, and she walks over, and she takes my arm, and she lifts me out of the chair, and she says, "I've changed my mind to the lawyers. I want to work with him. We're going to go have lunch if you want to join us." And she leads me out of the room. And the head of Random House is going, yes, yes. So he ended up buying half of the company for a while. But that's sort of that thing about how can creating a shared vision inside the company. This is one of the things we were talking about, is how do you keep your team and everybody involved? That, when I was building my first prototype, and I'd been working inside Brøderbund at this point for only 3 months, and all of a sudden I was getting to work on my own project. It didn't sit well with all the other animators who'd been there for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And who was that? I got a new monitor, 2 monitors, and a new Mac, and it was like, So as I was building my prototype, what I did was I needed voices and sound effects. I had everybody be a voice. My boss was a barking dog, which was so tweaked. You couldn't even hear that it was her. But we have more ownership in our voice than we do in our artwork. Somebody could have animated all of Dr. Seuss, but they go to see where their voice was. They go right to it when the product ships. And so every time I had to demo it, which was all the time, people 2 cubicles away would go, "That's me." And so they became part of the circle that wanted the product to happen. And so you create a shared vision. And that's what you were talking about. I mean, Voyager was like a commune for years down there on the beach. I remember people talking about it. And there's a certain camaraderie. And who was talking about keeping the team small? Earlier today was that same thing. Is that when the teams are small?
McCormick was saying that.
What?
McCormick.
McCormick was saying that.
Yeah.
Because there's a certain spark and joy that you can carry on when it goes like that.
I think if I'm going to put together what I've heard here so far, there is unbelievable assets out there. A couple of years ago, I went to Microsoft and sat down with Robbie Bach, and I said, "Hey, remember that Beethoven disc and that Mozart and Robert Winter?" I mean, it was just the most inspiring thing I'd ever heard. And I said, "What are you doing with all that stuff?" I don't know.
The Corbis stuff,
Richard, I think it was Robert Winter critiquing and taking apart the symphony.
That was Voyager.
That was Voyager.
Oh, it was
Not Corpus.
Oh, it was Voyager.
Well, it was Voyager.
of course
It was
Voyager.
life-changing. I mean, it was, and then there was how the leopard got his spots. It was when Patty Stonecipher was going to do 600 CDs a year. And I think she may have for a while. But the point is, these assets, kids like brides, like moms, they're only kids for so long, and then they grow into the next thing. And yet we are just starting to figure out the classics, the Oregon Trails and the Carmen Sandiegos, and the things that will endure over time no matter what medium. So I really think the most important thing we can all do is say, go get those assets and take these new devices where they're plentiful enough and the distributions, we've overcome all of those problems, and the time is right for this renaissance, I'd say.
Renaissance is great. Tell me real fast about the Wikipedia story.
Okay, so PC Magazine, we saw every nut, but So a guy named Jimmy Wales and his partner come in from Arizona. I forget even where they live, but they sit me down and they tell me about encyclopedias, and they have a new idea, and everybody's going to write the encyclopedia. And I just had them to, you have got to be kidding, you know, and sort of took issue with everything. And then walked into the other editors and said, I just had the fruitiest guy in the office. He thinks he's going to build an encyclopedia by the people or something like that. And so, you know, you sort of miss these amazing moments that people have these ideas, and there it goes.
When I was at High Scope Foundation in Ypsilanti, we had a group come from Texas, and they showed us these videos, and they wanted the High Scope Foundation to bless it with their aura. And it was we thought we saw that video, and we thought, oh, man, this is crazy. It's a big dinosaur. It's who's going to want to watch that? And of course, it was Barney.
Yeah,
missed that one too.
Anyway, and Brøderbund turned down Tetris.
Oh, really? That's great.
Everybody in the company was playing it, and they said, "No, I don't think this is going to work."
Yeah. So spotting magic is hard.
Spotting magic is hard.
Yeah.
But we're good at it, aren't we?
Mostly. Actually, you know, a couple of years ago, I went and read the things that I wrote, and mostly I was on the right side of issues.
And I would have to agree that you have a very good sense of picking up the magic, and that is a real art. It's like an artist. It's like an art critic or something. You look at a lot of stuff and you connect those dots.
But I think Darren said it, though. You have to distance yourself from it also, because we know so much about it. You know, when you see it through the eyes of whether it's an older person or a younger person, or somebody who comes at it from just a different place, you learn so much.
So there is a role for the people who are considered the legends to guide the inspired youth who still can stay up late.
Oh, yeah.
Scott, you want to ask a question? Comment?
No, I can't hear everything. It's a little hard to hear everything.
Okay, we can hear you. So do you want to say anything to the Duster Magic Asilomar group?
Do you want to say anything?
No.
What I've done is just kind of reinvented myself in the last years. I mean, I've worked in the toy industry for 30 years, and every 5 years I moved on to a different area. My name is Reyne Rice.
Details.
Small details, sorry about that. And so every 5 years I moved along. I worked at Ogilvy Mather on the Mattel account. Then I moved to Mattel and I worked on the licensing account and the international account. And every time I moved somewhere else, I learned something new. But over time, I moved into becoming a trend specialist. And really, it's more the connector of the dots and the connector of the people and the connector of the alliances, and trying to pull that together and make sense of it to the media when they come and say, well, what's happening in action figures, or what's happening in technology? And by going to 24 different conferences a year, I see the trends in different areas. And then how do you pull those trends down and make them real to the media who's reporting on one little thing?
So is it logical to ask you what's happening in apps?
Well, I think that everyone here has something to share on that piece, and I would really like to hear from everyone. And even if you feel you're just starting out and you're new and you're small, and I think that that's where a lot of these ideas come from. Those are the trickle ideas that just, can become the big ideas. So it's not just the legends here that have great ideas. It's, taking math and moving it with motion and bringing it to the kids. I mean, it's those kind of things.
So let me bring this out to the whole group at this point and say, tomorrow we're going to do a lot of brain sprints. The end of tomorrow, we're going to have real kids come in, and we're going to share your ideas with them to see what they have to say. And we know that, and they'll have laser pointers. And so mixed in with that, we'll be looking at a lot more stuff, a lot more hands-on stuff. And but start thinking tonight about where this is all going.
Can we ask Reyne one more question?
Yeah, sure, of course.
What do you see the toy industry Are they paying attention to apps world? Not paying attention?
I think in terms of apps, in the game side, that's an area where there's a lot of opportunity and growth because it's about brain building, it's about skill building, it's about the 21st century skills in the schools, but it's taking it into the home environment and allowing, you know, families to be able to do this with their kids, not just in the schools. But I think in terms of the toy industry, they're looking at it as part of a multi-platform strategy. It's one piece of their strategy, just like a website is one piece of the strategy, an iPhone app or some kind of mobile app. And I think the smart companies are going to make sure that they're involved in this space, in the mobile app space, or they're going to get left behind and looked at as dinosaurs.